I've always been the responsible one in the family. Growing up, I was the kid who saved my allowance, who stayed late at school to study for exams, who saved up for years to buy things instead of just spending impulsively like my younger brother, Jason. I was the one who had a plan, the one who knew what I wanted in life and how to get it. It wasn't always easy, but I found comfort in the steady rhythm of hard work and delayed gratification. Jason, on the other hand, was the opposite. He was the free spirit, the one who acted without thinking, who spent money on things he didn't need, and who always came to me for help when things didn't go as planned. He had a charm about him, always able to talk his way out of trouble, and somehow, he never seemed to worry about the future. It used to annoy me, how he could just float through life without a care in the world. Yet, despite his recklessness, I always looked out for him. After all, he was my brother. I had been working for years to save up a substantial amount of money. It wasn't just for an emergency or a rainy day. It was for something that had been my dream for a long time. I was saving for my own future, something personal that I wanted to achieve on my own terms. Maybe it was a trip I'd wanted to take, or perhaps it was an investment that would give me the freedom to pursue my passions. Either way, I had a clear plan, and my savings were my ticket to that dream. Jason knew about my savings. He knew how hard I had worked to get to that point, and I always thought he respected my efforts. I never thought that he would do something so reckless, so thoughtless. But then, everything changed. One evening, Jason came over to visit, and that's when I noticed something was off. He was acting strangely, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting with his phone. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the evening went on, I began to feel an uncomfortable tension in the air. We sat down to talk, and that's when I found out the truth. It started out innocently enough. He was telling me about his relationship with Emily, his girlfriend of about a year, and how they were getting serious. He'd been talking about proposing to her for months, and I had always assumed he was just joking. Jason had never been the type to settle down, at least not in my eyes. He was impulsive, and I just didn't see him as the marriage type. But then he dropped the bombshell. "I did something," Jason said, his voice suddenly quiet. "Something that I really need to explain." I looked at him, puzzled. "What did you do?" He hesitated, his fingers tightening around the edges of his phone. I used your savings to buy an engagement ring for Emily." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at him. "What did you say?" "I used your savings," he repeated, his voice almost pleading. "I didn't have enough, and I knew you wouldn't mind. I thought you'd understand." For a moment, I couldn't process what he was saying. My mind was racing. He couldn't be serious. I had worked so hard for that money, saving every penny over the years for something important to me. And now it was gone. Just like that. For a ring. For a proposal. You took my money?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and fury. Jason's face flushed. "I didn't want to go into debt, and I thought you'd be okay with it. I mean, it's for a good cause, right? I'm marrying Emily. I thought you'd be happy for me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was trying to justify stealing my savings with some weak excuse about love and marriage. It didn't matter that he had no right to take that money. It didn't matter that I had planned for something important with those funds. He had taken it without asking, without considering the consequences. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him how selfish he was, how wrong he was to do this to me. But instead, I just stood there, staring at him in stunned silence. How could he do this? "I didn't think you'd mind," Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't think I'd mind?" I repeated, the words barely making sense in my head. "You didn't even ask me, Jason. You just took it. My entire savings. Gone. And for what? To buy a ring." He nodded, his expression guilty but also defensive. "I thought it was the right thing to do. I needed it. Emily means everything to me. But that doesn't give you the right to take my money," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You didn't even ask. You didn't even think for a second that maybe I had plans for that money. That it wasn't just some pile of cash you could dip into whenever you needed something." "I'm sorry," Jason said, his voice soft, almost apologetic. "I never meant to hurt you. I swear. I'll pay you back, I promise." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But how could I? How could I trust him after this? After everything he had done? How could I ever feel the same about him again after he violated that unspoken trust between us? For the first time in my life, I was seeing my brother for who he truly was. And it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. I spent the next few days in a haze, replaying the events over and over in my mind. I kept thinking about how Jason had stolen from me, how he had taken something that was mine and used it for something that wasn't even his. It wasn't just the money that hurt, it was the betrayal. The fact that he hadn't even considered asking me for help, or at least discussing it with me before making that decision, left me feeling like I didn't matter. I was still reeling when Jason came over again. This time, he was more insistent. He looked almost desperate, like he needed something from me that I wasn't sure I could give. "I'm really sorry for what I did," he said, sitting down across from me. "I know I messed up, but I really need you to understand. Emily and we're getting married soon, and I've spent all my money on the ring. I just don't have enough for the wedding." For a moment, I sat there, stunned. "You want me to give you more money?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason nodded, his eyes pleading. "I didn't think it would be this expensive. The venue, the catering, everything. I just need some help, Lila." I didn't know who else to ask. I couldn't believe it. Not only had he stolen from me once, but now he was asking me to bail him out again. After everything that had happened, after what he had already done to me, he was asking for more? I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. "You stole from me to buy a ring, and now you want me to pay for your wedding? I'll pay you back," Jason insisted, his voice shaking. "I promise. I just need the help right now." I couldn't believe the audacity. He had no shame. How could he think I would just give him more money after what he had done? How could he ask that of me? "I can't do this, Jason," I said, my voice firm. "I can't help you again. You've already taken everything I had. I worked for that money, and it wasn't for you to spend on your wedding." Jason's face fell. "Please, Lila. I don't know who else to turn to. You're my sister. Please." I felt a pang in my chest, but I stood my ground. "I'm sorry, Jason, but the answer is no. You've already crossed a line, and I'm not going to let you take advantage of me again." His face turned red, and I could see the frustration in his eyes. "You're being selfish," he snapped. "This is for my future, too, you know. I'm not being selfish. I'm protecting myself. You need to learn the consequences of your actions," I said, shaking my head. "You can't keep treating me like this." Jason stood up abruptly, his fists clenched. "Fine. I'll figure it out myself. But you're being unreasonable." I watched him leave, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. I had made the right decision, but it felt like I had just severed a part of my family. The bond we had once shared felt irreparably broken. The days after Jason's confession were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything without thinking about what he had done. He had stolen from me, and not just any money. This was my hard-earned savings, the money I had set aside for my future. The idea that he used it for something as trivial as a ring, to propose to a woman he'd only been dating for a year, seemed almost laughable. If it hadn't been so painful, I might have found it funny. But there was nothing funny about it. It was a gut punch. I spent days in a fog, replaying the conversation over and over in my head, wondering if I could have said something differently, if there was any way I could have avoided this. But in the end, I knew that Jason had made his own choice. He could have asked for help. He could have explained the situation to me before making such a drastic decision. But he hadn't, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered trust in him. It wasn't just the money that hurt, it was the lack of respect. Jason didn't seem to understand the gravity of what he had done. To him, it was just a matter of borrowing money for something he thought was important. But it wasn't just money. It was a betrayal of my trust, a violation of a boundary I had never expected him to cross. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know if I could ever look at him the same way again. But then, a week after the disaster of that night, Jason called me. I was sitting on the couch, trying to distract myself with a book, when my phone buzzed. It was him. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the answer button. I didn't want to talk to him, didn't know what I could say. But as much as I hated to admit it, I still cared about him. Despite everything, he was my brother. I answered the phone with a sigh. "Hello. Lila." Jason's voice sounded strained, almost apologetic. "Can we talk? Please." I closed my eyes, running a hand through my hair. "What is there to talk about, Jason? You took my money. You didn't even ask. And now you want more." "I know," he said quickly, cutting me off. "I know I messed up. And I'm sorry. I swear I never meant to hurt you. But I need your help. I don't know who else to turn to." I felt a pang in my chest. It was hard to stay angry at him when he sounded so sincere, but I couldn't let myself forget what he had done. I couldn't just let him walk all over me. "What do you need help with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm short on money for the wedding, he said, his voice tight. I've already spent so much on the ring, and now the venue, the catering, everything is more expensive than I thought. I'm in over my head, Lila. I just need a little more to make it work. I was silent for a moment, absorbing what he was saying. So, after taking my savings, he was asking for more? Was he serious? I'm not sure I understand, Jason, I said slowly. You took my money. You used it for a ring. And now you want me to give you more so you can have a wedding. Please, he said, almost pleading. I just need the money to make it happen. I swear, I'll pay you back as soon as I can. I know I messed up, but I can't lose her. This is the only way. The only way? My heart ached as I realized how much he was willing to sacrifice for this wedding, for Emily. And yet, he was asking me to sacrifice again. My hard-earned money, the money I had worked for, was not something he could keep taking from me just because he was too careless with his own finances. You're asking me to pay for your wedding? I said, my voice shaking with anger. You've already taken everything I had. What more do you want from me, Jason? I'm sorry, he said again, his voice quieter this time. I don't know what else to do. You're the only person I can turn to. Please, Lila. You're my sister. You're the only one who can help me. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wanted to help him. I really did. But I also knew that helping him would mean enabling his behavior. He had already crossed a line, and I couldn't just keep bailing him out. I had to stand my ground, no matter how much it hurt. I can't do this, Jason, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. I can't keep giving you money. You've already stolen from me once. Why should I trust you again? He was silent for a moment, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. I'll pay you back. I swear, he said, almost desperately. You know I will. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice rising. It's not about paying me back. It's about respect. About trust. You took something from me without asking. You didn't consider how much it hurt me, how much it would affect me. And now you want more? How is that fair? I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, his voice breaking. I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect for Emily. I thought you'd understand. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger. You don't get to take my savings and then ask me for more. That's not how this works, Jason. I love you, but I can't keep letting you take advantage of me. I'm sorry, he repeated, his voice barely audible. I didn't know what else to do. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me, but I knew I had to stand firm. I can't help you this time, Jason, I said, my voice soft but resolute. You have to figure this out on your own. I've done enough. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then I heard him sigh. Okay, he said quietly. I get it. I'll figure it out. Thanks anyway. I hung up the phone, feeling a lump form in my throat. I had made the right decision, I knew that. But it didn't make it any easier. I had just told my brother no. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a line in the sand, and it hurt more than I could have imagined. The weeks following my confrontation with Jason were the longest of my life. I didn't hear from him. Not a text, not a call. Just silence. It was almost as if he had disappeared off the face of the earth. At first, I thought maybe he was too embarrassed to reach out to me. I had just told him no. No to more money. No to enabling his reckless behavior. No to continuing our dysfunctional cycle. I was sure he was hurt, maybe even angry, but I also knew that deep down, he needed to understand the consequences of his actions. I spent my days trying to keep myself occupied. I worked long hours at the office, threw myself into my hobbies, and tried to keep my mind off the situation with Jason. But every so often, I found myself thinking about him. My brother. The one person who had always been there for me in the past. And yet, he had crossed a line, and no matter how much I cared for him, I couldn't just forget what he had done. I kept telling myself that I had done the right thing. I couldn't keep enabling him. I couldn't keep letting him think that he could take whatever he wanted from me without any regard for how it would affect me. But as time passed, the weight of my decision started to feel heavier. I had drawn a line in the sand, but was it the right one? Was I being too harsh? Was I wrong to refuse him? But then, just when I thought I could move on, the phone rang one evening. I looked at the screen and saw Jason's name. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, and now here he was, calling me like nothing had happened. I took a deep breath before answering. Hello. Lila. Jason's voice was shaky, almost hesitant. Can we talk? I was silent for a moment, trying to steady my emotions. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me wanted to pick up where we had left off, to yell, to tell him how much he had hurt me. But another part of me, the part that still loved him despite everything, just wanted to hear him out. "What do you want, Jason?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, his tone apologetic. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I should have never taken your money. But I don't know who else to turn to right now. I made a huge mistake, and I don't know how to fix it." I could hear the desperation in his voice, and it was hard to ignore. I had never heard him sound like this before. Jason was always so confident, so sure of himself. But now, there was a vulnerability in his voice that made me second-guess myself. "You don't get it, Jason," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's not just about the money. It's about trust. You took something from me without asking. You didn't think about the consequences. And now you want to pretend like everything is fine." "I know," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I messed up, and I don't expect you to forgive me just like that. But I need you to understand. I didn't know what else to do. I wanted everything to be perfect for Emily. I didn't want to disappoint her, and I thought you'd understand." The words hit me hard. Jason had always been impulsive, always willing to take risks without thinking about the consequences. But this was different. He had crossed a line. And now, he was asking me to make things right, to fix his mess, to save him from the consequences of his own actions. "I understand that you want everything to go well for Emily," I said, my voice cold. "But you still shouldn't have taken my money. You should have asked, Jason. If you needed help, you should have come to me. But you didn't. You took what was mine, and that's something I can't just forget." "I know," he repeated, his voice breaking. "But I love her, Lila. And I thought if I could just get the ring and the wedding plans taken care of, everything would be perfect. I didn't think about how it would affect you. I didn't think about what I was doing." The guilt in his voice was palpable. I could feel the weight of his regret, and for a moment, I almost gave in. Almost told him that I would help him out again, that I would be there for him like I always had been. But then I remembered everything he had taken from me. Everything he had done without a second thought. "I can't help you again, Jason," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "You need to figure this out on your own. I've done enough. I've helped you, and it's time for you to take responsibility for your actions." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, but he didn't say anything. I didn't know if he was angry or hurt, or just processing what I had said. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know you didn't," I replied, my heart aching. "But you did. And now you have to live with the consequences." "I'll figure it out," he said quietly. I just wanted things to be different." "I know," I said softly. "But they can't be. And you have to learn to deal with that." We stayed on the phone for a few more minutes, but the conversation felt hollow. There was no resolution, no closure. Just the lingering tension between us, the distance that had grown so wide that it felt impossible to bridge. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. I didn't know what I expected from the conversation. Maybe an apology, or some sense that he truly understood the weight of what he had done. But instead, I was left with the same emptiness that had been building up inside me since the night he confessed. I had tried to do the right thing. I had tried to stand my ground, to teach him a lesson about respect and responsibility. But now I wasn't sure if it had worked. I wasn't sure if Jason had learned anything at all. All I knew was that things would never be the same between us. The days turned into weeks. The silence between Jason and me became more palpable, more awkward, as if every time I saw him, the distance between us grew just a little bit wider. I hated it. I hated how things had turned out, how my life had been so intertwined with his, and now, it felt like a thread was being pulled taut, ready to snap at any moment. I kept telling myself that I had done the right thing. I had set a boundary, stood up for myself, and refused to let him take advantage of me again. I couldn't keep enabling him. But despite knowing I had made the right decision, I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that gnawed at me. He was my brother, after all. I had known him his entire life. The thought of losing that connection, of the rift between us growing wider, was unbearable. I tried to keep my mind busy. Work was a welcome distraction. I threw myself into projects, met deadlines, and spent evenings at the gym. I did everything I could to keep from thinking about the mess that was my relationship with Jason. But no matter how busy I got, there were times when I'd catch myself thinking about him, about what had happened, about how things had been before. There were moments when I missed him. I missed the brother I had known before everything went wrong. The one who had been there for me when I needed him. The one who had always been just a phone call away. But now, every time I thought about him, the memory of him taking my savings would creep in. It was like a shadow that lurked in the corners of my mind, reminding me of his betrayal. How could I just forget that? How could I let him back into my life without some sort of reckoning? It wasn't that I didn't love him anymore. I did. But love was no longer enough. He needed to learn responsibility, to understand that his actions had consequences. And that meant I had to stick to my decision. I had to let him figure this out on his own, no matter how much it hurt. Then, one afternoon, I received a message that made my heart drop into my stomach. It was from Emily. At first, I stared at it, unsure whether I should open it. Emily was Jason's fiancée, the woman he had been so desperate to impress with the wedding plans and the ring. She had always been kind to me, and despite everything, I didn't want to get caught in the middle of their mess. But curiosity got the better of me, and I tapped on the message. Hey Lila, I hope you're doing well. I know things have been tense between you and Jason lately, and I wanted to reach out. I think he's struggling with everything, and I just wanted to let you know that he's been really down. He's been trying to figure out how to make it right with you, and he's really sorry for what happened. I stared at the message for a long time. It was clear that Emily was trying to reach out, to smooth things over. Part of me appreciated the gesture. She was trying to be the peacemaker, trying to fix the damage that had been done. But another part of me felt conflicted. Was it her responsibility to act as Jason's mediator? Was she truly aware of how deep the issue ran? Or was she just trying to keep the peace for the sake of the wedding? I didn't know what to say. I wanted to respond, to explain how hurt I was, how much I resented the fact that Jason had put me in this position. But at the same time, I didn't want to drag her into this. She was already dealing with Jason's mess, and I didn't want to make her feel like she had to choose between us. After a long pause, I typed out a response. Thank you for reaching out, Emily. I appreciate it, but this is something Jason and I need to work through on our own. I'm not angry with you, but I do need some time to figure things out. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It felt like the right thing to do. I didn't want to put the burden on her, but I also didn't want to let her think that everything was okay. It wasn't. Not yet. A few hours later, I received a reply from Emily. I understand, Lila. I just want you to know that Jason is really sorry. He cares about you a lot, and he doesn't want to lose you over this. Please take care of yourself. If you ever want to talk, I'm here for you. I sat there, staring at her message, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me appreciated her understanding, but another part of me felt more conflicted than ever. Was I doing the right thing? Was I pushing my brother away for good? Was I setting a boundary, or was I just being stubborn? That night, I had a long conversation with myself. I sat on the couch, the lights dimmed, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger. And then I thought about Emily's message. Jason's apology. The way he had sounded when he called me, desperate for help. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, trying to ground myself in the reality of the situation. I knew that I couldn't just forget what had happened. But I also knew that holding on to that anger forever wasn't healthy. I couldn't keep punishing him. He had made a mistake, a huge one, but he was still my brother. And if there was one thing I had learned through all of this, it was that no one was perfect. Not even me. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, I could start to work toward it. The next day, I called Jason. It had been weeks since our last conversation, and I wasn't sure what I was expecting. But when he picked up the phone, his voice was immediately apologetic. Lila, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know I screwed up, and I don't know how to fix it. But I need you to know that I'm trying. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to make things right with Emily, and I didn't think about the consequences. I don't know what I was thinking. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Jason. But you did. And I'm still angry about what you did. I'm not ready to forgive you yet. But I'm willing to talk, to try to figure this out. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, waiting for me to say more, to tell him how I felt. But I didn't know what else to say. I had already said everything I needed to. Now, it was up to him to prove that he had learned something from all of this. I'll do whatever it takes, Lila, he said, his voice almost breaking. I'll work hard to make this right. Just give me a chance. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. Maybe we could rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, patience, and a lot of work. But I wasn't ready to give up on him. Not yet.